Hey, welcome back to my vlogs of how to make it in the new music business by Herstand. Again, just breaking down another chapter, and this one is about crowdfunding, which I've talked a little bit about on my podcast, talked to some artists who've had some real success with it. I've seen some artists have some serious success with crowdfunding, and I think it's a lot of work, and you have to be smart about it, and I think you have to have somewhat of a following, but it's totally doable. And I think next time I do a project, I'll be crowdfunding. So a lot of people, it's a new idea, so there's always resistance to new ideas, but I do think it's valid. He makes a point that people kind of like look down on it, but have no problem signing for a label and giving away all their creative rights. So think about it a little bit that way. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of by any stretch of the imagination. There's a few different platforms, and there's Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which are better for bigger platforms, and then Patreon, or better for big projects, and Patreon is more of a consistent thing that you're constantly updating, whereas Kickstarter and Indiegogo, it's like this one big push. So you can offer things you can offer sort of through Patreon is exclusive access to B-sides, demos, live streams from the studio or from the rehearsal spaces. And people are happy in general to get digital content, so that way you don't have to worry about shipping things if you just do digital content. So that's a good little thing to think about. And Patreon and like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, they're two separate things. You can run a Patreon simultaneously to running a Kickstarter and Indiegogo. They're two different platforms and two different services, essentially. So recently I've been doing a lot of reading about Nipsey Hussle's rise and the way he did things, and I'm really inspired by Nipsey Hussle and how he just built this thing by him independently. It's really beautiful. And what he did is he had his Proud to Pay, so he did $100 like his mixtape was for free digitally, but you could pay $100 for a physical copy, and you can invite your fans to pay for your music, but don't make them pay for your music. They can get it free streaming, but if they're proud to pay, then they're happy to put money forward for your music. So that's just a way to think about it. Now, Kickstarter versus Indiegogo. Indiegogo offers a flexible funding which allows you to receive your funds even if you haven't reached your goal number. And on my podcast with Fia, she said that she prefers to do flexible funding, whereas Ari says he strongly recommends not doing flexible funding, because you can end up with flexible funding, if you don't make your goal number, you can end up with less money, but you still have to fulfill all these orders, and you can end up running at a pretty serious loss. So something to consider. I think it depends on what you're offering. If you're just offering digital stuff, then it's probably not as big of a deal because your costs aren't going to be as high. But if you're promising vinyl or something like that to everyone, it's kind of a ludicrous idea, but say you offer vinyl to everybody who decides who pitches, and then you don't receive enough money, but you still have to fulfill all these vinyl orders, you can end up losing a lot of money. So just something to consider depending on what you're offering, flexible funding, or make sure you have to reach your goal. Speaking of vinyl, there's something called vinyl crowdfunding. Q rates is one of the places you can go to, and it's basically a risk-free way of trying to fund doing vinyl, where you can reach out to you can run a crowdfunding for vinyl, and if you reach your goal, then you can print your vinyl and there's no money out of your pocket. And if you don't reach your goal, then they don't charge you anything, and they don't print anything, obviously, and you don't lose out, essentially, other than time and effort. So that's pretty cool. I talked to somebody about it, and he said he had a really tough time doing it, but still, if you have a fan base that's serious about vinyl and collector's items, I think it's worth a shot. He breaks down the different sort of musts of running a successful crowdfunding campaign, which I'm going to break down for you. So first of all, you have to rebrand. Basically, doing a Kickstarter is like doing an album rollout in terms of the effort that you need to put forth on social media. So you got to be posting every day, rebranding with like, a good name, and like, what is this project all about? What's the driving force behind it? Make sure you get like all your color schemes looking good and everything like that, and make sure you have an image for your Kickstarter campaign. And then create a good timeline. You don't want it to be too long. Apparently 30 days is about the ideal, because you want people to have a sense of urgency. And then creating attractive rewards. And something that he said, which I think is a really good idea, is to go to your friends and go to your fans and ask them what they think good rewards would be, and really dialing that in, because you can't, like, there's so many Kickstarters that you have to really make sure that they're really engaging rewards that that will bring in money, essentially. And then celebrate the launch. So day one of the launch, you have to really get excited and like really get going. Like I said, it's like an album launch, so take the day off work and just be engaging, answering questions all over on social media consistently. Create a great video. He says this is the most important part of the campaign. You want a really engaging video. Pick a realistic goal. If you have 100 email subscribers, you probably don't want to set for $10,000 to be your goal. You can always raise more than your goal, but you could end up with $0 if you set an unrealistic one. And speaking of which, you can create stretch goals, which is like, say you have 5,000, then you could do 7,500, 10,000, and have additional rewards that go with these higher goals that you set. Make sure you set a budget before your launch. You don't want it to be so high that you can't reach your goal, but you don't want the goal to be so low that you're going to lose a lot of money when you're fulfilling your orders. And make sure that every time you post, you have a link. You're posting a link every single time you're posting about your Kickstarter. That way people aren't like having to dig through, maybe someone sees your post 6 times and you put a link in, and then the 7th time when they're actually ready to give the money, you don't put the link in, and that little bit of resistance can be the difference between getting a donation and not. And he says in the middle, you're bound to kind of lose momentum. The first week, people are excited. In the last week, there's a real sense of urgency. But that middle ground can be tough. So running contests, making personal appeals, writing messages to people and stuff like that to keep the momentum going is really important. And you have to make people believe that they're part of your next phase of your career and they're helping like build you up. So make sure there's a we're in this together kind of deal. And don't beg. Don't be afraid to get annoying. It always is tough to put yourself out there and just like keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But I think it's really important to, there's so much media coming out that people are consuming every single day, and people have to be reminded again and again and again and again before it starts to register that this is something that they can do or want to do. So don't be embarrassed. And then personalize. Write personal messages to people who may want to support, but it just hasn't registered with them yet, or they haven't had time. Doing that one-to-one thing can be huge and maybe a pain in the ass, maybe even hard to do if you're more of a shy or introverted person, but I think it's really important. So that's the crash course on how to run a successful Kickstarter. If this is something that you want to do, I know Indiepreneur has some courses. I know there's some courses out there that will help you be a lot more, have a much higher success rate. So I would suggest, there's a lot of potential money at stake here. So really invest, study, and do it right before you do it. And yeah, good luck.